Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. Let's take a look at a video.
When you know, you know. When you know.
So there are two periods in the history of Christian art where we actually see Jesus represented with some feminine features. One is between the 3rd and the 6th century CE, and the other is in Western Europe during the medieval period between around 1000 and 1500 CE. And these are motivated by different things, and neither is the normative, common, default way of depicting Jesus. Both are exceptions and fairly rare, but there are very clear depictions of Jesus with feminine features in these two different periods. For instance, here is a statue from the 4th century CE that is on display in Rome's Museo Nazionale delle Terme, and this was originally thought to depict a seated poetess. And then a lot of scholars noted that the position, the themes in this piece match some other depictions of Jesus, and now it is understood to depict a youthful Jesus. And we do see in Roman artwork, borrowing from Hellenistic depictions, the representation of young boys as slightly androgynous in this period, so that may be borrowing from that motif more than trying to depict Jesus as intersex. Now here's a depiction of Jesus from a sarcophagus. It dates to around the 4th or 5th century CE, on display in the Museo Archeologico in Ravenna in Italy, and this motif is known as the Traditio Legis, which represents Jesus in a higher position on a rock or a hill or something, holding a scroll of the law with two people in a lower position, creating kind of a triangular composition. And here you can see Jesus is represented with very clear narrow waist, wider hips, prominent breasts. These are very clearly female features, and this is probably borrowing from a tradition that represents certain deities as presenting with female features or wearing female clothing. Serapis, Apollo, Dionysius, and some others occasionally pop up in the art and in the literature with female features. So this is part of this stream of tradition within this period between the 3rd and the 6th century CE, where we're adopting some of the conventions from earlier Greco-Roman art that converges the masculine and the feminine together within deity. And then we have a mosaic from the 5th century from the Blessed David Chapel in Thessaloniki in Greece, depicting kind of a soft-featured, beardless Jesus that has feminine qualities as well, and they're actually sitting on a rainbow. Imagery like this does pop up between the 3rd and the 6th century CE within Christian art, and particularly as that art is participating more in the conventions and the motifs of earlier Hellenistic and then Roman art. Now, we do see some similar ideas coming through in some literature, the ideologies of some Christian groups. For instance, an author named Epiphanius, in their text, the Panarion, discusses somebody named Priscilla, who was thought to be a prophetess, who talked about a dream that they had. And it says here, the Quintilianists, that's the sect that Epiphanius is talking about, whom Epiphanius rejected as heretical, say that either Quintilla or Priscilla, I am not sure which one, but one of them, as I mentioned before, slept in Pepusa, and Christ came to her, and he slept next to her, and it happened this way according to the misled woman. Christ came to me dressed in a white robe, she said, in the shape of a woman, instilled into me wisdom, and shared with me how that this place is holy, and that Jerusalem will come down from heaven here. And because of this, even down to this day, they say that certain women and men also are initiated there on the site, so that those people can wait for Christ and see him themselves. There are women in this group whom they refer to as prophetesses. We also have some depictions of deity as both masculine and feminine within the Gnostic literature. The Gnostics were a group that took Middle and Neoplatonic ideas about creation and about the distinction of the spirit and the flesh, and overlaid that upon Jewish and Christian stories to come up with these new ideas about a wicked deity named Yaltabaoth, who is the one who represents themselves as the high god in the Hebrew Bible, and how Jesus is coming down from the actual deities to give humanity a way to ascend above the corrupt flesh and reunite with the pleroma, and that is how salvation is represented. And there are some texts that represent deity presenting themselves in both masculine and feminine ways. Probably the clearest is a text called the Trimorphic Protonoia, or the three forms of first thought, where Sophia and Barbello and others represent themselves in both masculine and feminine forms. But we also have the idea within some Gnostic streams of tradition that women must become masculine in order to achieve the highest degree of salvation. So this tradition has different ideas about sex and gender. Now, when we get to the medieval period, we have something different going on. Here's a painting from the late 16th century CE that is on display in the Belgian Museum of Notre-Dame à la Rosa that depicts Jesus' body with very clear female breasts. He even seems to be cupping one as a means of offering nourishment to the grieving women around him. And this is part of a stream of tradition within medieval Christian art that began to feature feminine qualities in their representation of the corporeality of Jesus. And this is because in this time period, the spiritual aspects of Jesus were considered more masculine, whereas the corporeal aspects were considered more feminine. And so we have the representation of Jesus/God as both father and nursing mother that we find in a few places in the Hebrew Bible coming through in the representation of Jesus's body. So again, this is the exception rather than the norm, but this is something that very clearly pops up within the arts of medieval Christianity between the probably 11th and 16th centuries CE. It would be inaccurate to say that Jesus was considered intersex or was unilaterally represented as intersex for 1,000 years and then became a cis man. These are still minority representations of Jesus, and they are still primarily confined to these periods between the 3rd and 6th centuries CE and then the 11th and 16th centuries CE. However, there were periods where authors and artists did use Jesus as the canvas for exploring the intersection of masculinity and femininity in association with the divine, and it didn't seem like anybody had much of a problem with that. And for a wonderful discussion about how God's body was represented throughout the Bible and also in Christian artwork, Francesca Stavrakopoulou's God and Anatomy has a lot of great stuff in it. I highly recommend that book.